Donald Trump blindsides Barack Obama's peaceful town hall with an unscheduled call-in, only to get demolished by a single sentence that's now burned into America's memory. Nobody in that Phoenix auditorium saw it coming. What started as a routine, Tuesday evening discussion in Arizona, Obama relaxed in his chair, jacket open, speaking eloquently about democratic values, suddenly turned electric when the moderator's earpiece buzzed with an urgent message. In that instant, everything changed. "Mr. President," the moderator stammered, his voice barely steady as he stared into the camera lens, "we've just received word that President Trump is requesting to join us live." A collective gasp swept through the Phoenix Convention Center. This wasn't part of the program. No sitting president had ever hijacked his predecessor's broadcast, certainly not on live national television. Behind the glass partition, producers frantically gestured, their faces pale with panic. The moderator looked like he'd just been handed a live grenade. Obama, however, remained perfectly still. He leaned back slightly, one hand resting casually on the chair's armrest, the other touching his chin thoughtfully. If anything, he appeared amused, as if he'd been expecting this exact moment all along. "Put him through," Obama said, his voice carrying that familiar, measured cadence that millions had missed since 2016. The massive screen above the stage flickered to life, revealing Trump's face via video feed. His voice boomed through the sound system, filling every corner of the auditorium. "Barack, I had to jump in here," Trump began, his tone aggressive from the first word. "I'm watching this entire charade, and it's absolutely disgraceful. You're sitting there talking about democracy, while your administration hemorrhaged jobs left and right. Under my leadership, we built the most incredible economy the world has ever witnessed. Everyone knows it. The numbers don't lie." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, whispers rippling through the crowd. This wasn't just unusual. It was a collision of political titans, unscripted and raw. Obama didn't rush to respond. Instead, he turned toward the audience, letting the silence stretch before speaking as if he were chatting with old friends in a living room. "Well," he said softly, a hint of amusement in his voice, "looks like we have an unexpected guest tonight." Nervous laughter erupted, momentarily breaking the tension. But everyone could sense where this was heading. A confrontation nobody had rehearsed for, one that could explode across social media within minutes. Trump, emboldened by successfully interrupting, the broadcast pressed his advantage. "People remember the disaster you left behind, Barack. Manufacturing was dying, China was eating our lunch, and our military was a joke. I rebuilt everything from scratch, and the results speak for themselves. If I hadn't stepped in, this country would be in complete ruins. Now you want to sit there, acting like you accomplished something meaningful? You didn't. Everyone knows it, Barack. They know." His words weren't polished or diplomatic. They were blunt instruments designed to dominate the conversation. But they carried the weight of the presidency behind them. His name splashed across every headline, his face on every network, every single day. The audience, however, had stopped looking at the giant screen. Every eye was now locked on Obama, waiting to see how he would respond. Would he take the bait? Would he match Trump's aggression? Would he let it slide? Instead, Obama leaned forward slightly, clasping his hands together, and looked directly into the camera. He didn't match Trump's volume or urgency. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who had weathered countless storms and understood the power of perfect timing. "Mr. President," Obama said, pausing to let the words settle in the air, "I believe the American people care less about who can shout the loudest and more about who actually tells them the truth." The crowd exploded into applause, some people jumping to their feet. The moderator shifted nervously, part relief, part anxiety about where this unprecedented exchange might lead. The confrontation was no longer theoretical. It was happening in real time, and Trump's response would determine whether he could regain control of the narrative. Trump fired back immediately, his voice rising with frustration. "Truth? Give me a break. You want to lecture me about truth when your entire presidency was built on empty promises and pretty speeches? People don't want academic lectures, Barack. They want results. And I delivered results that you never could have imagined. But something fundamental had shifted. Obama's calm, measured response hadn't just deflected Trump's attack, it had exposed the contrast between them in the most visceral way possible. Viewers at home could feel the difference in their gut, one man storming, the other unshakable. In that moment, the room no longer belonged to Trump. It belonged to Obama. But this was only the beginning. What came next would create one of the most replayed moments in recent television history. Long before Trump's surprise intervention, the evening had been carefully designed to feel thoughtful and intimate. The Phoenix Convention Center, with its glass walls overlooking the downtown skyline dotted with palm trees, provided an elegant backdrop. The stage was deliberately simple: two comfortable armchairs angled toward each other, a small coffee table with water glasses, and an audience arranged in a semicircle. The invitation to Obama had been positioned as a conversation, not a debate, a chance to discuss democracy, unity, and the qualities needed to hold a fractured nation together. The cameras captured diverse faces throughout the audience: teachers, veterans, college students, retirees, some wearing faded Obama campaign shirts with pride, others simply curious to hear what the former president had to say in this more volatile political climate. Reed Lawson, the seasoned Dallas journalist serving as moderator, opened with gentle questions designed to set a contemplative tone. "Mr. President," he began, "when you survey our current political landscape, what concerns you most about the health of our democracy?" Obama settled back in his chair thoughtfully. "I worry," he said slowly, "that we've begun confusing performance with actual leadership. We have politicians who believe that trending on social media equals doing their job effectively. But real leadership isn't about accumulating likes or retweets. It's about whether you genuinely improve the lives of the people who trusted you with their vote." The audience responded with measured applause, not the thunderous roar of campaign rallies, but the thoughtful acknowledgement that comes when words ring true. For nearly 40 minutes, the conversation flowed in this rhythm. Obama addressed voting rights, the importance of listening to voices outside your echo chamber, and the dangerous spread of misinformation online. He never mentioned Trump by name, but his words cast a shadow that everyone in the room recognized. A young public school teacher from Mesa raised her hand. "How do you maintain faith in the system?" she asked, "when so many people are losing theirs?" Obama smiled warmly. "That's an honest question, and it deserves an honest answer. Look, the system has never been perfect. It wasn't perfect when I was running it. It wasn't perfect during Lincoln's time, and it won't be perfect for your students. But here's the crucial thing. It only functions when people like you remain engaged. When teachers, nurses, veterans, small business owners, when ordinary citizens keep pushing, keep holding leaders accountable. That's democracy's lifeblood. Without it, all you have left is theater." People throughout the crowd nodded, some wiping away tears. The energy wasn't electric, but it was steady, like a warming fire rather than a brief flame. Meanwhile, behind the cameras, producers monitored the broadcast carefully. Ratings were solid, social media engagement was climbing, and clips of Obama's responses were already circulating online. For some viewers, the event felt like a nostalgic reminder of the past. For others, it was a stark contrast to the political noise they'd grown accustomed to. That's when the first alert arrived in the control room. "White House is monitoring." Nobody thought much of it initially. The White House always watched. But then came another message. "President may respond." The director exchanged worried glances with the floor manager. "Respond how? Through a statement, a tweet, a press briefing?" By the time the moderator moved to another question about voter participation in Arizona, it became clear this wouldn't be an ordinary night. The staff could sense something building, though they couldn't predict its exact form. A veteran from Flagstaff raised his hand. "Mr. President, what's the single most important piece of advice you'd give to the current occupant of the Oval Office?" The room quieted. Obama tilted his head, choosing his words carefully. I'd say this. When you're president, you don't get to speak only to people who agree with you. You have to communicate with everyone, even those who didn't vote for you, because whether you like it or not, they're still your boss. That's the job. The response landed powerfully. It wasn't flashy or provocative, but it carried the weight of experience. People applauded again, leaning forward in their seats. Back in the control room, however, alarms were practically sounding. President Trump wasn't going to let that slide. Not tonight, not on live television with millions watching. But nobody expected him to do more than issue a statement or fire off a tweet. Nobody anticipated he would actually hijack the broadcast himself. The moment it happened, you could feel the entire auditorium hold its breath. Reed Lawson had just finished a question about misinformation when his producer held up a small white card, waving it frantically from the side of the stage. Reed squinted, adjusted his glasses, and read the note. His face paled. He cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice betraying his shock. I've just been informed of something highly unusual. President Trump has called into our broadcast. The audience gasped in unison. Whispers spread like wildfire. An elderly man in the back row muttered under his breath, "You've got to be kidding me." Obama remained seated comfortably, crossing his legs and resting his elbow on the armrest. If anything, he looked amused, as if he'd been anticipating this exact scenario all along. "Go ahead," Obama said smoothly. "Let's hear what he has to say." And just like that, Trump's voice exploded through the speakers. The initial feed was audio only, rough and unpolished like a speakerphone call. "Barack," Trump barked, "I couldn't sit here watching you spread lies on television without setting the record straight. You left this country weak and broken, and under my leadership we achieved the strongest economy in world history. People know it, economists confirm it, everyone acknowledges it. Nobody's ever seen anything like what I accomplished." The crowd stirred uneasily. Some booed, others laughed nervously. Within seconds, though, Trump's face appeared on the giant screen above the stage. It wasn't professionally lit or camera-ready. This was Trump in real time, behind the resolute desk, his red tie askew, his expression intense. "You were a complete failure, Barack," Trump declared, his voice echoing through the hall. "You're trying to rewrite history, but history doesn't lie. People remember the lost jobs, the shuttered factories, the disastrous deals with China. It was a catastrophe. I fixed it. Nobody gives me the credit I deserve, but I fixed everything." Obama waited. He didn't immediately respond, instead folding his hands in his lap and studying the screen, as if observing a chess opponent making their opening move. The audience held its collective breath. Reed, desperately trying to regain some control, interjected, carefully, "Mr. President, we appreciate you joining us, though this wasn't scheduled." Trump cut him off instantly. "Of course it wasn't scheduled, because nobody wants me here. They never do. But the people watching at home, they want me here. They want to hear the truth. And the truth is, Barack, you're overrated. You always have been. The fake news media keeps giving you airtime, pretending you were some kind of hero, but you weren't. You weren't anything special." Some in the crowd shouted back. A young man in the second row yelled, "Let him finish," while another voice called out, "This isn't your rally." The clash of voices only heightened the electric tension. Obama finally leaned forward, resting both elbows on his knees. His tone remained even, deliberate. "Well," he said softly, "I suppose we're breaking new ground tonight." The line drew laughter from the audience, momentarily easing the tension. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. Trump pressed on, his voice climbing higher. "People know I accomplished more in 4 years than you did in 8. I brought jobs back, rebuilt our military, stood up to China, NATO freeloaders, everyone who was taking advantage of us. You didn't do any of that. And now you sit there acting like some wise elder talking about democracy. You don't understand democracy. You don't understand strength." The audience was split, some groaning and booing, others clapping as if watching. A prize fight unfolded before their eyes. Obama exhaled slowly through his nose, then raised his eyes to the camera. "Mr. President, people at home can see what's happening here. You're shouting, you're repeating yourself, and I think what they want tonight is clarity, not noise." That sentence alone shifted the entire atmosphere. You could see it on people's faces. A man in the third row leaned forward, whispering to his companion, "He's got him." Trump's image on the screen flickered slightly, as if the comment had struck deeper than expected, but he snapped back aggressively. "Clarity, the only. Clarity here is this: without me, America loses. With me, America wins, that's it. That's the whole story." The words hung in the air. Obama remained still, watching calmly. The silence stretched, and every person in that auditorium could feel the tension. Two presidents, two completely different approaches to power, locked in an unscripted confrontation. The moderator attempted to intervene, but it was too late. This was no longer his show. It belonged entirely to them. But the real fireworks were just beginning. By now, the atmosphere inside the Phoenix Convention Center was thick with anticipation. It wasn't the kind of tension that dissipates. It was the kind that pulls everyone to the edge of their seat. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. People in the audience gripped their armrests, and even Reed Lawson could barely keep his voice steady as he tried to guide the conversation back toward normalcy. But Trump had no intention of backing down. "Barack," Trump said, jabbing his finger toward the camera as if Obama were sitting directly across from him, "you were an absolute disaster for this country. Look at the numbers. Look at the trade deals. Look at the border situation. I came and cleaned up every single mess you left behind. The stock market hit record after record under my leadership. Unemployment reached historic lows. People were winning again. That's what I delivered. Real results. You gave them speeches. Gave them success." The audience stirred, some booing, others applauding, but no one looked away. Every eye remained fixed on the stage, waiting for Obama's counter. Obama leaned back, his hands forming a steeple in front of him. He didn't raise his voice or show irritation. If anything, he looked like someone who had heard this particular song many times before and knew every note. "Well," he said with measured calm, "I think people remember that when I took office, the country was hemorrhaging 750,000 jobs every month. The auto industry was on the brink of collapse, banks were failing, and families were terrified they might lose everything. So yes, we worked incredibly hard to turn that situation around. By the time I left office, unemployment had been cut in half, the stock market had doubled, and millions of Americans had health insurance who never had it before." A wave of applause swept through the crowd. Trump jumped back in immediately. "Fake numbers, completely fabricated. Everyone knows it. You manipulated the books. You brag about saving the auto industry. But I'm the one who brought manufacturing back. Brought back the jobs. I made America respected again around the world." Obama raised his eyebrows slightly, as if Trump's outburst had perfectly illustrated his point. "Respect," Obama said evenly, "isn't about how loud you are in the room. Respect comes from whether people trust you, whether our allies trust us, whether ordinary Americans believe their leader is being honest with them." The room erupted again with applause, louder this time. Someone in the back shouted, "That's exactly right." Trump smirked on the screen, shaking his head dismissively. "You always had pretty words, Barack. That's your thing. Pretty speeches, with no substance behind them. Me? I'm about action. People wanted someone strong, someone who fights back. That's why I won and you lost. That's why you're sitting there talking, and I'm sitting here leading." The comment landed like a punch, using the very fact of his presidency as the ultimate trump card. The audience braced for Obama's response. Obama, however, didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, closing the distance between himself and the camera. "You're absolutely right," he said plainly. "You won an election. That happens in democracy. But winning doesn't mean you stop listening to people who didn't vote for you. It doesn't mean you spend every day attacking critics instead of doing the actual job. The presidency isn't a trophy to be won. It's not about you. It's about them, the people who sent you there." The audience roared, applauding so enthusiastically that the moderator had to raise his hands for quiet. The contrast between the two men was becoming stark. Trump fiery and combative, filling the air with volume. Obama calm but surgical, carving his arguments with precision. Trump snarled back, his frustration evident. "You don't get it, Barack. People love me because I fight. I fight the fake news media. I fight the Democrats. I fight China, NATO, everybody. You bowed down to all of them. You gave away the country. People know it, and that's why I'm going to win again. That's why people still want me back in the White House." The mention of another election drew murmurs throughout the crowd. Some booed loudly, others jeered, while a handful of Trump supporters in the audience clapped defiantly. The atmosphere was more like a heavyweight boxing match than a town hall. Obama smiled faintly, shaking his head as if he'd just heard an amusing tale. "You know, fighting everybody isn't the same as leading anybody. Anyone can pick a fight. The real question is, can you actually build something? Can you leave people better off than you found them?" It was subtle, but the audience felt Obama circling closer, applying pressure without raising his voice. Trump's face reddened on the giant screen. "I built the strongest country in world history. You left it weak. Weak borders, weak military, weak economy. I made it strong again, everyone knows it. That's why they cheer me at every single rally. Thousands and thousands of people. The biggest crowds anyone's ever seen." Obama chuckled, softly, and that quiet chuckle sent a wave of laughter across the audience. He didn't even need to speak. The room could sense where the power was shifting. Reed Lawson glanced nervously between the two men, his papers trembling slightly. This was no longer a Q&A session. It was a live showdown, raw and unfiltered. But Obama hadn't even delivered his sharpest line yet. What he was about to say would completely flip the exchange on its head. The room was practically vibrating with energy now, the kind that makes every breath feel sharp and heavy. Viewers at home could feel it too. The split-screen image of Trump calling in live from the White House and Obama seated in the Phoenix Convention Center was surreal, like watching two heavyweight champions sizing each other up. Except this wasn't a boxing ring. This was democracy playing out on primetime television. Trump leaned forward at his desk, his voice cutting through the air like a siren. "Barack, you're jealous. That's what this really is. You're jealous because I'm in the Oval Office, not you. I built the strongest economy in history, the lowest unemployment rates ever recorded. Everyone was winning under my administration. Farmers, workers, police, officers, everyone. Under you, nothing but weakness and disaster." His words came in rapid-fire bursts, each one designed to dominate the conversation. The camera zoomed in on his flushed, animated face. The audience was split, pockets of boos clashing with scattered applause, while others simply stared in disbelief at what they were witnessing. Obama let it all play out. He didn't interrupt or talk over him. He simply sat still, shoulders relaxed, waiting for Trump to exhaust himself. When the president finally paused for breath, Obama straightened his posture, adjusted his microphone, and spoke with a voice so calm it cut sharper than any shout. "Mr. President," he began, "the American people don't need you to rattle off statistics like a salesman. They don't need slogans or another round of keeping score about who's winning and who's losing. They need leadership. And leadership isn't about making yourself the hero of every story. It's about making sure the story is actually about them." The audience burst into thunderous applause, some people jumping to their feet, clapping with both hands raised high. Trump shook his head aggressively on the screen, his expression twisted with irritation. "Oh, give me a break. You talk like a college professor. People don't want lectures, they want results. And I delivered results. Look at the stock market, Barack. Look at the job numbers. Look at border security. You were weak, and that's exactly why I had to fix everything you left behind." Obama leaned forward, resting both hands on his knees, his gaze steady and direct. His voice was soft, but every word was deliberate. "You know, Mr. President, the job isn't just about who can build. The biggest crowd or claim the biggest numbers. Numbers can go up and down. Crowds can cheer one day and boo the next. What people never forget is whether you respected them, whether you told them the truth even when it was inconvenient, whether you treated them like citizens instead of props. The audience clapped again, this time even louder. Someone shouted, "Tell him." Trump's face contorted with frustration. Truth? You want to talk about truth? You lied about everything. Obamacare was a disaster. The Iran deal was a disaster. You left this country more divided than ever before. I came in and brought it back. People know it. They cheer me everywhere I go. You can't even fill a high school gymnasium anymore. Obama chuckled lightly. He didn't deny it or get defensive. Instead, he tilted his head as if studying a puzzle. You know, I've been out of office for years now, and I still get invited to speak with young people, teachers, veterans, community leaders. I may not get stadium crowds anymore, but I get something better. I get to look folks in the eye and know that when I left office, their lives were a little more stable than when I arrived. That matters to me more than any rally. The crowd roared. With the loudest applause of the night so far, Trump's eyes narrowed on the screen. Stable? You call losing factories stable? You call handing billions to China stable? Nobody believes you anymore, Barack. They believe me. They believe what I say because I don't sugarcoat anything. I tell it exactly like it is. The words hung heavy in the air. The moderator tried to interject, but Obama raised a finger gently, signaling he wasn't finished. "Mr. President," he said calmly, "telling it like it is doesn't mean you're telling the truth. Sometimes it just means you're saying things loudly enough that people stop asking questions. But leadership isn't about noise. It's about honesty." The reaction was immediate. Cheers, claps, even a standing ovation from the left side of the room. Cameras caught the stunned expressions of people whispering to each other. He's got him cornered. Obama remained seated, composed and unshakable. Trump, however, fidgeted slightly in his chair, shifting papers and adjusting his tie. It wasn't panic, but it was visible discomfort, undeniable discomfort. Reed Lawson cleared his throat nervously. "Gentlemen, if we could—" But there was no pulling back now. The confrontation had moved beyond economics and policy. This was about truth, character, and how each man carried himself in front of millions. But Obama was saving something even sharper, a line that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. The studio was electric. Every eye was locked on Obama, every ear tuned for his next words. Trump had just finished another barrage of boasts, claiming he alone had rebuilt America, but the energy in the room had shifted decisively. Obama wasn't rushing. He wasn't snapping back. He was waiting. Trump leaned closer to the camera, stabbing his finger at the lens. "You're a talker, Barack. That's all you ever were. Someone who talks pretty but gets nothing done. I'm a doer. People wanted a fighter, and they got one. That's why I'm sitting here and you're sitting there." Some in the crowd hissed. Others shook their heads. The moderator sat frozen, barely able to maintain his composure. Obama inhaled slowly and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, not louder than a living room conversation, but that only made everyone lean in closer. "Mr. President," Obama began, "there's something you still don't understand about this job. It's not about making everything about you. It's about making people feel seen and heard, even when they didn't vote for you. Because when you only fight for yourself, you're not leading, you're just performing." The crowd erupted, but Obama wasn't finished. He raised his hand slightly, quieting the room, his eyes still locked on the camera. "You brag about building the strongest economy, but leadership isn't measured by how many times you say the word winning. Leadership is measured by whether families feel secure, whether kids have real opportunities, whether people can look at their president and feel like he actually respects them." Trump rolled his eyes on screen, smirking. "Blah, blah, blah. People don't buy it anymore, Barack. Nobody's buying it." Obama tilted his head slightly, as if he had been waiting for exactly that interruption. He paused just long enough for the silence to grow heavy. And then he delivered the line that would be replayed for days across every network, every social feed, every dinner table conversation in America. "Mr. President," Obama said evenly, "when you have to keep telling people you're winning, it usually means you're losing where it matters most." The words hit like a thunderclap. The audience gasped first, then erupted into a standing ovation. People were clapping, cheering, some even stomping their feet. Reed Lawson's mouth fell open before he quickly pressed his lips together, trying to hide his shock. Trump blinked rapidly on the screen, visibly rattled. He tried to fire back, but his voice cracked slightly. That's nonsense, people. No, I'm winning. They know it. Look at the rallies, look at the crowds." But his words were drowned out by the roar of the crowd in Phoenix. Cameras zoomed in on the audience. A young woman in tears, an elderly man clapping so hard his glasses nearly slipped off, college students jumping to their feet. Obama didn't gloat. He didn't smile triumphantly. He simply sat back in his chair, calm and collected, letting the moment speak for itself. When the applause finally died down, he added softly, almost as an afterthought, "America doesn't need a performer-in-chief. It needs a commander-in-chief." The room exploded again. Reed Lawson could barely maintain order. Trump's face flushed red, his jaw working as he struggled to speak over the noise. "This is fake. Totally fake. It's staged, folks. It's rigged television," he barked, but his words carried less weight now. The audience had already chosen their winner. In that moment, back in the control room, producers exchanged stunned glances. They knew they had captured television history. Twitter was already exploding, clips of Obama's line racing across the internet faster than anyone could track. When you have to keep telling people you're winning, it was a line made for sound bites, but more importantly, it was a line that carried undeniable truth, something people could feel in their bones. Obama turned his attention back to the moderator, his expression as calm as it had been when the night began. "Reed," he said, "let's get back to the questions. I think the folks here came to talk about the future of democracy." It was the ultimate power move. He had delivered the knockout punch and was now moving on as if the fight hadn't even fazed him. The audience roared again, but Trump kept shouting, his voice rising higher and higher. "You're weak, Barack. You're a weak president. Nobody respects you anymore." Obama didn't respond. He simply took a sip of water, set the glass back down, and waited for the next question. It wasn't just the line itself that had silenced Trump. It was the way Obama had delivered. Calm, deliberate, undeniable. A sentence so sharp it cut through the noise of an entire presidency. But the real shock wasn't just how Obama had handled the moment. It was how the country would react once the cameras stopped rolling. The Phoenix Convention Center was still, roaring with applause, cheers, and laughter, the kind of energy that shakes a building from its foundation. Obama's devastating line had landed like a precision strike, and the audience was still riding the wave of that electric moment. For a brief instant, it felt less like a town hall and more like a live concert, with Obama as the performer who had just delivered the song everyone came to hear, even though nobody knew they needed it. Trump, however, wasn't ready to surrender the spotlight. His face filled the giant screen, flushed and tight with frustration as he pointed aggressively into the camera. "Don't be fooled, folks. This is fake news at its absolute worst. Rigged TV, totally rigged. You're clapping because that's what the media programmed you to do. They tell you to cheer for him, they tell you to boo me. But out there in the real America, people know I'm right. They know I delivered. Biggest crowds, biggest numbers, the strongest country we've ever had." The audience booed, drowning him out. Some people laughed, others shouted back. One man stood up and yelled, "He just buried you," which sent half the room into a frenzy of claps and whistles. The moderator, Reed Lawson, looked like he wanted to disappear. He shuffled his notes, cleared his throat repeatedly, and tried desperately to regain control. "Mr. President, President Trump, we appreciate your time, but perhaps we should return to—" Trump cut him off immediately. "No, Reed, don't try to silence me. That's what you people always do. You silence me, you silence my supporters. But not tonight. I'm the president, I don't get silenced." Obama leaned back again, his expression calm. even slightly sympathetic, like a teacher watching a student unravel during a debate. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The silence itself had become part of his counter-argument. Cameras briefly cut to the audience, capturing people whispering to each other, shaking their heads, grinning in disbelief. It felt historic. Two presidents clashing live on national television with no script, no filter, and no way to take any of it back. Finally, Reid turned desperately back to Obama. "Mr. President, former President Obama, shall we continue with the next audience question?" Obama gave a slight smile and nodded graciously. "Of course, let's hear from the people who came here tonight." The crowd applauded again, eager to move forward. But Trump wasn't ready to let go. "You're not getting away with that cheap shot, Barack," Trump snapped. "You're not. It was completely unfair, totally unfair. People see right through it. No, I'm winning. Everyone knows I'm winning. Look at the rallies, look at the polls. They're massive, they're incredible. Nobody's ever seen numbers like mine." The desperation in his repetition wasn't lost on anyone. A few groans filled the air while people shook their heads in disbelief. Obama finally leaned forward, his tone still perfectly steady. "Mr. President, with all due respect, I think the American people have already heard your case tonight. Maybe we should let them hear from each other now." The line drew another round of applause. Trump tried to jump back in, but the noise in the hall drowned him out completely. The moderator seized the moment, calling on a middle-aged veteran in the audience. The man stood, his voice strong but measured. "With all due respect to both of you," he said, "I served under administrations from both parties, and I'll tell you this. What we need isn't another shouting match. We need a leader who can actually bring us together, not tear us apart." The audience cheered again, the veteran's words adding fuel to the fire. Obama nodded at him respectfully. Trump shook his head on the screen, muttering into his microphone, "Fake veteran. They plant these people. Total plant." The comment drew a chorus of boos. At that point, even Reid couldn't hide his discomfort. "President, I think we've taken enough of your time this evening. We appreciate your input, but this event was designed to focus on President Obama's perspective. Perhaps we should continue with that." Trump scowled, his face darkening. "Fine. But you'll all see. The people are with me, not him. Me!" The feed abruptly cut. The giant screen went black. The room exhaled collectively, like a pressure valve finally being released. A woman in the front row shouted, "Thank you," and the hall broke into laughter and cheers. Obama sat quietly, allowing the noise to build before speaking. When the audience finally calmed, he leaned toward the microphone. "Well," he said with dry humor, "that was unexpected." The understated comment sent the hall into laughter again. Reid sighed audibly, adjusting his tie. "Mr. President, I think we should move forward." Obama nodded, smiling faintly. "Let's do that, because the future of our democracy is too important to get lost in all that noise." The audience applauded once more, but the night had already taken on a life of its own. Obama had landed his devastating line. Trump had sputtered in response, and the clip was already racing across phones and tablets faster than anyone in the room could imagine. But the real chaos was waiting outside these walls, where media outlets and social platforms were about to transform this exchange into the story of the week. By the time Obama finished the town hall and shook hands with the last audience member, the world outside had already transformed. The moment he delivered his knockout line to Trump was clipped, captioned, and circulating across social media before he even left the stage. In Los Angeles, baristas at a late-night coffee shop crowded around a phone behind the counter, replaying the clip with wide eyes and dropped jaws. In Cleveland, a group of college students huddled in their dorm common room, shouting in disbelief as Obama's words played on repeat. In Phoenix itself, people leaving the convention center were already live streaming, breathlessly telling friends, "Did you hear that line? Did you hear what he said?" News outlets pounced on it immediately. CNN flashed a banner, "Obama silences Trump with live TV comeback." MSNBC played the clip back to back, with commentators practically giddy with excitement. One anchor said, "That might be the sharpest, most devastating line I've ever heard delivered on live television." Even Fox News, typically loyal to Trump, couldn't ignore the moment. Their anchors shook their heads and debated whether Obama had crossed a line or whether Trump had walked directly into a trap. But the internet had already rendered its verdict. On Twitter, the quote was trending worldwide within minutes. Memes exploded across every platform. Obama seated calmly with captions like, "When you keep saying you're winning." TikTokers stitched the clip with everything from sports highlights to comedy sketches. Even celebrities, actors, athletes, musicians jumped in to share it. By midnight, "Obama shuts Trump down" was the #1 trend in the United States. Inside the White House, according to reporters, Trump was furious, pacing the Oval Office, demanding a response. He called aides into the room, insisting they draft talking points immediately. But by the time any official statement was ready, the story had already sprinted miles ahead. On MSNBC, clips of Obama sipping water after delivering the line were shown with dramatic pauses, commentators calling it a mic drop moment. On CNN, Anderson Cooper replayed the audience's reaction, the cheers, clapping, gasps, saying, "That's not just a crowd reacting, that's a collective release." People knew they were witnessing history. Even late-night comedians, barely an hour after the event ended, had already rewritten their monologues. One joked, "Trump called in to heckle Obama, and Obama basically said, 'Sir, you're yelling because you've got nothing left.' I mean, ouch." The live studio audience howled. Meanwhile, back in Phoenix, reporters chased audience members outside the convention center. One college student holding her phone up to record herself said breathlessly, "I've never seen anything like it. He didn't even raise his voice. He just said it, and Trump had absolutely nothing." Cable news replayed that soundbite too. By morning, newspapers across the country had plastered the quote across their front pages. The Washington Post led with, "Obama's words slice through Trump's bluster." The Arizona Republic ran the headline, "Town Hall turns historic after Obama's one-line response to Trump." Even international outlets picked it up. BBC, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, each noting how surreal it was for a sitting president to interrupt his predecessor live on television, only to be so thoroughly dismantled. Trump's allies rushed to spin the story. Senator Ron Elkins from Nebraska appeared on Fox and Friends, insisting the former president was disrespectful. He insulted the sitting commander-in-chief. That's not statesmanship, but the clip was too powerful to be spun away. The internet wasn't dissecting civility. It was reveling in the spectacle. Commentators called it a generational moment. For older viewers, it recalled the sharp debates of the past, moments like Kennedy versus Nixon. For younger viewers, it was the perfect meme, short, cutting, replayable in seconds. In living rooms across America, families argued. A retired couple in Des Moines shook their heads saying, "Finally, someone told him straight." In a diner outside Dallas, truckers debated whether Obama had been clever or disrespectful. In a high school classroom in Tucson, students played the clip on repeat, some laughing, others stunned at how rattled Trump had looked. The deeper significance began to crystallize. Tone mattered, presence mattered, and when contrasted against Trump's storm of words, Obama's calm line had exposed the difference in the sharpest way possible. On social media, one tweet went viral with millions of likes. Obama didn't out-yell Trump, he out-truthed him. The media frenzy only intensified as political analysts weighed in. Commentators on NPR called it a turning point in how Americans will remember the Trump-Obama dynamic. On ABC, a panelist observed, "That single sentence reminded people that restraint can be more powerful than rage. That's why it worked." Obama himself said nothing afterward. His aides confirmed he went back to his hotel, ordered room service, and didn't watch a minute of the coverage. That silence made the moment even more powerful. While Trump's team scrambled to defend and respond, Obama's quiet confidence told its own story. By the second day, the clip had been viewed tens of millions of times online, was being dissected in college lectures, replayed on morning radio shows and quoted in church sermons. The words had transcended politics and entered culture. But the most powerful impact wasn't in the headlines. It was in the conversations, happening around dinner tables, in classrooms, and in workplaces across the country. The morning after the town hall, America woke up buzzing with conversation. It wasn't just political junkies dissecting every word. It was everyone. The clip had broken out of the news cycle and entered daily life, flowing into barbershops, diners, classrooms, and offices where people rarely agreed on anything political. In Detroit, at Wilson's barbershop, 3 men sat in chairs while clippers buzzed in the background. A customer named Raymond, a retired mechanic, leaned forward as the TV in the corner replayed Obama's line for the 5th time. He slapped his knee and laughed. Man, he shut him down without even raising his voice. That's how you do it. That's pure class. The barber, spinning the chair with his foot, chimed in. You could see Trump's face. He wasn't ready for that. He's used to everybody yelling back. Obama just cut him down with calm. Down in Dayton, Ohio, a waitress at a roadside diner balanced 3 plates on her arm while a group of truck drivers at the counter argued over coffee. One of them, a burly man in a faded baseball cap, shook his head. I don't care what you say, Trump's right. The numbers don't lie, he did fix things. Another driver countered, jabbing his fork at the air. Fix things? He got roasted last night, couldn't even handle one sentence. My wife doesn't even follow. Politics, and she was clapping at the TV. The waitress smiled quietly to herself, overhearing the exchange. For her, the power of the line wasn't about politics. It was about tone. Obama had reminded her of her grandfather, steady, firm, saying just enough to win the argument without shouting. On a college campus in Madison, Wisconsin, students replayed the clip on laptops between classes. One group gathered in the student union, laughing and cheering as Obama's words echoed through tinny speakers. A freshman said, "This is the first time I've seen someone actually get under Trump's skin. Like he couldn't spin it. He just froze for a second." Her roommate shook her head. It wasn't even the words themselves. It was the calm. Like you could tell he was completely in control the whole time. That's what got to him. Meanwhile, back in Phoenix, locals who had been in the audience couldn't stop retelling the story. Maria Hernandez, a school counselor, told her neighbors, "You could feel it in the room. Like goosebumps. He said it so softly, but it hit so hard. Nobody will forget that moment." Across the country, news anchors collected these small testimonies. NBC interviewed a factory worker in Pittsburgh who said, "I don't usually care for Obama, but last night, I respect that he handled it like a man." CNN featured a group of veterans from Kansas City discussing how leadership is about composure, not volume. Even conservative radio callers admitted Trump had looked rattled. Social media remained relentless. Twitter feeds filled with side-by-side memes, Trump yelling into a microphone on one half, Obama sipping water calmly on the other. The caption, volume versus substance. On Instagram, influencers who rarely mentioned politics posted stories, saying, "This is why tone matters." Not everyone was laughing, though. Trump supporters dug in, flooding Facebook with posts insisting the event was staged, that the network had manipulated Trump's audio to make him look weak. They shared grainy screenshots claiming evidence of tampering. The counter-narrative was fierce, but even among Trump loyalists there was quiet acknowledgement that the moment hadn't played well. In small-town diners, in grocery store checkout, lines in union halls and Sunday church gatherings, the story was consistent. People talking about that line. It was the rare political moment that didn't require context. Anyone who heard it understood exactly why it stung. The life lesson hidden in those words was what people kept circling back to. Parents explained it to their kids as an example of not letting bullies control the room. Teachers used it in classrooms as proof that composure could defeat noise. Coaches even quoted it at practice. You don't have to yell about winning, just play the game right. In some ways, it stopped being about Obama or Trump. It became about leadership itself, what it should look like, what it shouldn't. That night, as families sat in living rooms across America, Clips replayed on televisions while conversations stretched late into the evening. A mother in San Antonio turned to her teenage son and said, "See? That's why it's not always the loudest person who's right. Sometimes it's the one who keeps calm." Her son nodded, eyes glued to the screen, absorbing the lesson without another word. But as the nation debated and digested, one truth was becoming clear. This wasn't just a TV moment. It was a cultural marker, and it would leave echoes in politics long after the applause died down. When the dust finally settled, the country found itself replaying not just a line, but a moment. The sight of Obama sitting steady, almost motionless, delivering a quiet truth that left Trump completely rattled. It was burned into people's minds. It wasn't the theatrics of a rally. It wasn't the manufactured drama of cable news. This was raw, unfiltered leadership displayed in real time. In the days that followed, analysts argued over the political implications. Some said it was a devastating blow to Trump's image, proof that his loud, combative style could be punctured with precision. Others insisted it was just another viral moment, destined to fade when the next controversy hit. But outside the talking, heads and party strategists, ordinary Americans were taking away something far more personal. In a classroom in Phoenix, a teacher asked her students what they learned from the exchange. One boy raised his hand and said, "Sometimes you don't have to yell back. You just have to say the truth and let it stand." The teacher smiled, recognizing that the lesson had landed deeper than politics. In a church basement in Des Moines, a pastor referenced the clip during his Sunday sermon. "When you're secure in what you know is right," he told the congregation, "you don't need to shout about it. Truth has its own volume." Heads nodded around the room, people murmuring their agreement. And in living rooms across the country, families used the moment as a springboard for conversations with their children. Parents explained that leadership isn't about ego or showmanship. It's about humility, clarity, and respect. Kids listened, replaying the clip on their phones, processing the difference between noise and wisdom. The irony, of course, was that Obama hadn't prepared for any of this. He hadn't walked into that town hall expecting a confrontation. The line wasn't a rehearsed punchline. It came from his instinct to steady the conversation. That authenticity was what gave it weight. People can spot rehearsed lines from a mile away. This one carried the ring of truth. For Trump, the moment was harder to shake. His allies worked overtime, flooding airwaves with counter-narratives, insisting Obama had been disrespectful or that the event was staged. But the clip was too strong, the reaction too visceral. People weren't debating statistics anymore. They were talking about tone, about character, about who looked like a leader when it mattered most. The broader lesson reached far beyond politics. Coaches used it to remind athletes that bragging about winning isn't the same as earning respect. Managers in offices shared it as an example of staying calm under pressure. Parents pointed to it as proof that bullies thrive on noise, but they falter when someone refuses to play their game. And for millions of Americans, it stirred something deeper, nostalgia for a style of leadership rooted in composure and principle, rather than chaos and spectacle. At the heart of it all was a simple truth. Words matter. How you say them matters. And in a country often drowned in shouting, one sentence delivered with composure could echo louder than hours of bluster. That's why the clip stuck. That's why it spread. It wasn't just that Obama had won the exchange. It was that he reminded people that winning, in the truest sense, isn't about dominating an opponent. It's about lifting a standard for everyone watching. As one political analyst put it on NPR, it wasn't Obama versus Trump, it was composure versus chaos. And composure won. For the audience in Phoenix, for the millions watching at home, and for the countless others who would see the clip later online, the takeaway was clear. Real strength isn't in the shouting, it's in the steadiness. And maybe that's the lesson worth carrying beyond politics, into classrooms, workplaces, families, and friendships. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm, tell the truth, and let the world decide for itself. So if you're watching this right now, ask yourself, in your own life, when the noise gets loud, when tempers flare, when someone tries to rattle you, will you match the volume or will you hold your ground with calm? Because history shows us that calm wins. If this story spoke to you, if it reminded you that words matter and composure carries weight, then don't forget to subscribe. More stories like this are waiting, and each one carries a truth we can all learn from. Stay steady, stay honest, and let the truth do the talking.